It's a Sunday morning and we are here in Canada speaking with Master Liborio. Comment ça va, monsieur?
Ça va bien, très bien, merci.
Ça va, ça va? Welcome to Ottawa. Welcome to Canada. It's an honor to meet you, sir. Obviously, you're a very humble person, but you're world-renowned, highly respected individual and influencer in combat sports, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and mixed martial arts. Now, you've been on the tatami since you were 4. That's over 45 years. First question I'd like to ask you, sir, what has the tatami, stepping on the tatami, training in judo, and then transitioning into jiu-jitsu, what has that meant to you personally and professionally, and dare I say spiritually?
Okay, so somebody asked me this question before. First of all, I want to thank you. I thank all of you guys that are watching right now. We're here in Canada. Beloved Canada, you can say that. Oh, yeah. This is one of my favorite places to come and enjoy my friends and the culture and the people and the kindness. The kindness is out of this world, the food. So I really appreciate to come over here. I love it. I always love to come over. Somebody asked me this before, and what it means to me exactly to be inside, and it's not just life. It has everything to do with my own happiness, because when I'm not doing well, and I go figure it out, is because I'm not or training or moving or helping or just involved with what it did. This is way beyond, like I said, this is way beyond the technical aspect of physical. Is spiritual, is the place that I go together to center myself, to reevaluate, and at the same time, it is my work. At the same time, it's the place that I build up my friendship, my dear, deep friendship with people that I know since I was 14. You know, I started with 4 as judo, but I was always related to this. I think I'm the only Brazilian guy who really never liked soccer, never was into soccer, ever.
Really?
Never.
How come?
I don't know. There's something hard to even explain. My father was a big soccer fan. My whole entire family played soccer, but I never was. I was into the fights or the Muay Thai or the boxing or the judo or the wrestling. It was always an individual sport that fascinates me. I don't know. Try to explain that. I can't. Until today, I cannot watch soccer, or I can watch a little bit of football because I've seen the tackles, but it has a lot to do with the martial arts. It's hard to explain, but it always was there. You know, another thing I always like it is surfing too. Maybe it's individual sports. I don't know exactly. I try to even analyze that, but it always was related to something that was not too much common on TV. You see it a lot of attraction on TV for soccer and football or American football or rugby or things like that, and basketball, baseball. I never had a cue for that. I always liked the martial arts. So this always was extremely special to me. You know, I knew that this was something that is extra. What can I say, man? It's just so hard to define this. This is way beyond for me as a job. You know, this is my happiness, my life. This is how not just I support my family, but how I want my kids to be related to it. You know, be involved into it. So it's kind of easy for me. I have a passion for teaching and seeing people progress. I have a passion to see students rise and excel and doing well. So for me, is my special place in happiness. Of course, it's not always, you know, it's not always that you're happy everywhere. But when you analyze this, usually something that takes you away from the core, from the love. You know.
Can you give us kind of an overview, a summary of what it is about Brazilian culture? Because as we know, Brazil is a very interesting country. One of the most interesting countries if you look at its history, obviously in terms of its migration from the Japanese who immigrated to Japan. I believe they have one of the largest communities outside. The largest community of Japanese outside Japan is in Brazil. Right, and as well on top of that, there's also immigration from various parts of the world, from the Middle East, from Africa, so on and so forth. So there's all these cultural influences. question is, what is it about Brazilian culture and combat sports? Because when you look at combat sports across the board, regardless of the style, obviously Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is known worldwide. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsukas are known worldwide. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is known worldwide. So is Brazilian Judo. So is Brazilian mixed martial arts, boxers, and so on and so forth. What is it about the Brazilian, dare I say, spirit that kind of enables all these great athletes from that country to excel? Can you elaborate on that?
Well, a couple of things come to my mind. First of all, we never have a history of a war, which is usually plays against you in the future because the youth thinks that, the elaboration of the romantic side of the war, you're fighting for your country and you go there and you create that unity or brotherhood that you just find in wars, is appealing. It's like I say, it's romantic, it's beautiful. But war is not that. We all know that war has deep, deep issues in the scars. I don't need to go there and reminisce on this thing, but definitely Brazil doesn't have a history of it. And I think people romanticize and think too much of that and have that war spirit on it. Culturally, like you said, there are so many different races and they're all mixed. But the biggest problem that we have there definitely is a social-economic division. There's a huge gap in between the poor and the rich. So you have that 1% of rich people, very short, small middle class, and we have that, the poverty, in many divisions, but the majority is poor. But the poor really leaves next by the rich. Seeing the guys driving a Mercedes and the other guy is living in a carbon box, and it creates society, it creates division. There is various situations that you see the state or the government not getting to certain places like the slums and Rio, what we call favelas, and they have their own type of a justice there, So Brazilians live daily basis with violence. That's something else. Maybe because we don't have that history of war and we think that this is romantic or whatever it is. When you see it in everyday basis, that type of violence, afflicting everyone, not just the poor, but the rich and the middle class, you see there's a lot of happen. It creates a sense of you have to learn how to defend yourself. You have to learn at least how to survive. And that's a little bit different than here. It's different than U.S. There's the justice too. The justice system that you really rarely you go to jail for fighting in Brazil. I'm just saying the bads, but at the same time, you have that warrior spirit, like you say. You have that necessity to prove yourself and to rise above and don't quit. There's so many things that inspire in the culture of the Brazilians. So they have this thing and they try to flourish. You don't have the wars, don't have a military presence anywhere. We're okay with the neighborhoods, so they fight. But you're right about this. You're great boxers, great Muay Thai fighters, great judo fighters, great BJJ and MMA. And they're still more implemented different, like wrestling, for example, which is a gap that they have in Brazil because of judo culture. All this, man, is compiled. Fighting is the second biggest sport watching on TV. It's more watched than this is statistically. They have the Playboy channel there.
Right.
The Combat Sport channel has more signups than the.
Oh yeah, I mean, in the Americas alone, Brazil is the most important market for combat sports, be it mixed martial arts or any other combat sports in terms of an audience. And it's known, if you follow international combat sports, that the Brazilian audience is the most engaged, loud, and passionate sort of emotionally invested audience, which makes it a perfect win-win for combat sports, be it, again, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Judo.
But you know what happens to you? I think all the soccer clubs invested a lot in MMA and in BJJ and in some other sports. And this is created because the whole they're very passionate about the sports. It's extreme. It's soccer especially. It is really. You probably know what it is here from football or and rugby or whatever you guys you have, or hockey beyond anything else. You know, you really live this thing in the skin. So one of the fighters go there represent, like Aldo is represent the Flamengo soccer club, and they come from the culture, and he was part of the organized cheer leading group there. You know, everybody was supporting, you know, just because he was wearing the flags and the colors of Flamengo. This is I'm talking about millions of people, man. Just Flamengo has a we call torcida of 10 million people. I think it's the biggest in the world. It's the biggest in the world. And Corinthians, when they're another one in São Paulo, also has a program of a fighting. So all this, it creates this passion, and they have the chantings and everything else. Brazilians don't have, besides that, they don't have many heroes. The investments on Olympic sports, except for judo, it's not as big. You see judo and you see boxing being very successful. Besides that, there's not many. There's not much. There's all grassroots. They're all as grassroots, bringing up from the sport, put in the school system. You don't have much of that. So when you go from there and you see those guys rising above, and you got to count on that. And so many weight divisions, male and female, it brings a lot of medals in. You know, so judo is extreme. And besides that, the administrators did a great job propagating the right philosophy, you know, of training and teaching and instructing. Everything was pretty doing right in judo. Things that I think even judo or jiu-jitsu should be following up. There's a lot of things there. With that, you see extremely successful sports and combat, you know, like you said, itself. And besides soccer, because the investment is huge, you don't see any other sports. That's fighting and soccer. That's what it is.
A lot of high-level practitioners and coaches and instructors like yourself, which is a small community that come from Brazil, tend to have that on their resume, that being a background, a solid foundation in judo, as well as an extremely solid foundation in jiu-jitsu. Why is that?
Because of the culture of judo. Judo has an extremely, very well-detailed teaching system for kids that BJJ started catching up now.
Just now.
So in judo, when you have a 5-year-old kid, you actually prefer to put your kid in judo because of the well-structured programs that they have there. Is the curriculum, is the way they teach it, you know, it's very oriented, and it is more, it's more oriental in a way that judo, you learn judo with the hardcore philosophy of martial arts. BJJ is more westernized. You know, it's mixed a little bit. It came to get the boom in America, you know, started in Brazil. So it got that flavor of more Western, Brazilian, American, and whatever it is right now. But in judo, not. It's really the names and the philosophy is still the same for hundreds of years. And it's easier. And it was well structured for kids. Now it's catching up. BJJ is catching up. It put in a lot of connections. Reality is, judo came from jiu-jitsu, and the jiu-jitsu transformed, which is so-called BJJ today, coming from judo. So Maeda Koma, who taught Carlos Gracie, was more the judo guy than just jiu-jitsu, you know? And it was the flavor of BJJ and the rules that applying on the ground and all the things was created.
There's I guess, a movement internationally and as well in Canada with Kosen Judo. And some argue that Koma, what he brought over to Japan was Kosen Judo. That's more Niwaza focused judo, which is more or less Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, what I say is this. Because of the rules that we're applying, and these rules were created in Brazil. They created the sport jiu-jitsu competition. And the sport jiu-jitsu competition award way more points on the ground than a stand-up. So say a takedown goes 2 points, and from there on, you have all the groundwork that you go from 4, 3, you know, passing the guard 3, mount position 4, back position 4, and it creates a game. And when you play the game, even when you're training at school and you're training jiu-jitsu, you're kind of mentally competing because you know the score. But develop the sport, being on the ground so much, this is unparalleled. You can't compare what a BJJ is. And because I believe of the creation of the rules and regulations, it facilitates. Like giving a good example. Now judo, you can't touch the legs. So what happens to the single leg? What happened to the kataguruma? What happened to? There's a couple of things there that you really extinct from the sport. You know what I'm saying? Or Greco. If you train Greco, you're not going to go foot sweeps. You're not going to be able to go single or double legs. So in the sport of Greco, you take this thing out. In jiu-jitsu, in this case, there's so much on the ground, so much time on the ground, you have to develop position. You have the time to do it. You have to move it and everything else. So the rules and regulations actually determine the development of the sport. And that's what's happened.
Now, you've worked with USA Wrestling as far as the developing their grappling stream. Can you talk to us about what it's like to work with high-level wrestlers from the U.S., be it freestyle and Greco-Roman, and their transition into more of the submission-based style of wrestling that you're familiar with?
See, any Olympic sport goes in a different level of athlete.
Please elaborate.
Elaborate like this. For example, the grassroots of the sport is in Olympics right now. It starts from 4 or 5 years old, and the way they bring the kids in, the way they train the kids for competition, for like if you have a traveling competition team and the kids are going everywhere, getting used to the train, and you see this in judo, you see this in wrestling, it's a different level. It's a different level of mentality. It's a different level because the rules are adapted too. You have a short time of rules. BJJ is 10 minutes. It's kind of hard. You got to practice for 10 minutes and you have 10 minutes of going. And wrestling is 5 minutes. Judo is reducing for 4 minutes right now, and it's just a go type of thing. So explosiveness, strain, speed, all this counts. But you got a kid training and competing from 5 years old. This kid's going to be a monster. He's going to be in every type of situation, overcoming a depression of fears, even to get lost. You're lost. All right, suck it up. So when you go there, you go to compete, you're ready for anything. There's so many physical, mental developments, in the strategies that you can create, and you're just going to learn if you compete. That's just fabulous. So even for Olympian, when you get an Olympian, he's so used to the hard work. He's so used to go on a big stage too, because that's another thing. You put a guy who is in a small stage and he go to UFC, and now he is around thousands of people right there. Well, before it was 1,000, 2,000. Now we have 10,000, 50,000 with all that schedule of facing off or making a weight in the right time and filming and cameras, and that's a spotlight. It scares a lot of people. Usually, if you actually compete in Olympics in any sort of sport, you kind of know the big stage, and it's going to make the difference. Besides that, you're the top of the top. You're in the Olympics, you're on the top of the top. We have all our competitions right now, but when you're competing with countries that they don't have absolutely nothing, like for example wrestling. I work for the Olympics. I work in the Olympics for wrestling and judo, and I saw everybody, and you see countries that we are not very aware of, like the Kazakhstans and
Central Asian countries.
Gosh, they are unbelievable. And why? Because the culture is that. Yeah. The only culture. And why here everybody wants your kids to actually be, you go to Dagestan, and here everybody wants their kids to be a lawyer, a doctor, or learn to program, to be the new Bill Gates. There, they wanted a guy to be a warrior. They wanted a guy to establish, or he'd go to the military, or he's going to fight MMA, or he's going to do a wrestling. And, you see in Dagestan is like that. So it's cultural. It's really majorly cultural. And those guys are monsters. And they got support from the government. They have grassroots programs, and this thing is flourishing and booming,
Yeah, those amateur systems that you speak of in the Caucasus region of Russia and across the board heading west in Central Europe all the way to Mongolia, there's huge support in terms of amateur sport development for a lot of these traditional international sports, be it wrestling, freestyle Greco-Roman, or judo. but there is, as you mentioned, a culture where the sportsman and sportswoman is respected. Correct. Right? They're respected and yeah, the end rewarded.
Sometimes it's not even money. This is what you're doing. Yeah. You see how important it is, even your role in this thing, because martial arts itself, there's not much money in martial arts as it is in other major sports. So a lot of what we are doing, it has to do with pride, with what are we wanting. There's love involved. If you just want it for the money, you should have better got a different job in the morning and then go teach at night. But if you're really loving and passionate about it, it's not that you cannot raise a family with that, but you have to know systems. But even you have a huge role, because the majority of those guys, the only what they need is to put more students. They need the media. They need the right, correct media, not just saying the truth or whatever media it is. They put their names out there. If you're passionate media or press or marketing, that's all extremely important for the spread of sport, but also bring news and make athletes and the coaches to feel rewarded, because that's about love and sometimes recognition.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a huge role that communications and marketing plays, but I think culture, as just to go back to the initial question, culture is a very important aspect of that narrative, right? And every 4 years in this country and internationally, there are the Olympics. And every 4 years, people remember, oh, yes, we have Olympians in this country. But the reality is, they, generally speaking, in Canada, they don't get as much. And we know this for a fact. These combat sports amateur athletes don't get as much media support, to a point where I will go as far as saying that they do themselves a disservice, because storytelling and communicating and engaging with the community is as important as what you do on the tatami.
100%. That's extremely important. Like I said, if you get to know people because of documentaries or interviews or researches or even when you just lay down the results of a big competition. You're right about this. There's, in 4 years, people find out, oh, there is wrestling in this country, there's judo in this country, there's whatever it is in this country. But at the same time, you see, with the right media, with the right investment, with the right point, box is a good example of that. They made 4.6 million pay-per-view right now. Reflects this as hundreds of millions of dollars. This is huge. The boxer, Mayweather, is the most well-paid athlete of the year. Again, in the house of $1 billion, being an athlete, and the most well-paid for minutes. So you go there for 12 rounds and the 10 rounds, and he makes more money than I don't know, but a soccer player is a famous soccer player there, And that's Neymar. I think Neymar signed $50 million with Paris, Saint-Germain, and it was like $50 million for 10 years. Yeah, this guy made $100 million in 30 minutes.
Sure. When we speak of one of the most successful amateur combat sports in the world, particularly in North America, obviously here in Canada and the U.S., it has to be jiu-jitsu. Brazilian jiu-jitsu has to be. And obviously, marketing has been one of its strongest, along with its amazing curriculum. Marketing has been one of its strongest assets. What is your opinion on the current state of no-gi? Well, let's stick to Brazilian jiu-jitsu. What is your current opinion on the state of international Brazilian jiu-jitsu?
I think BJJ was the right sport at the right time. Like I said, all the marketing aside, the efficiency of the sport was proven when the hoist came in and started kicking everybody's butt. No doubt. And with the big guys, which were real athletes, they're not joking about it. Got a really good wrestling guy, and then just go put it over there, and you got to submit it. And so far, so on, you have heroes on the sport, much smaller guys that prove the efficiency of the sport. So everybody understood the necessity of learning ground, or the submissions, or the submission escapes, or whatever it is. And the sport developed at the point that everybody knows this. Everybody. There's no way for you to take that. You can call it different names, but it's still the same. You cannot take a sport like wrestling, for example, which has a tremendous, and I say wrestling because I believe wrestling has a great background to teach a guy to fight stand up and on the ground. You know, if you got a really good Muay Thai guy, he just what to do is stand up, not on the ground. All this influence and muscles tight when you actually go BJJ guys so used to fight on the ground, now he's fighting stand up. If you don't pass the adaptation sport, it's just different. You're using different muscles. You go back again and pulling guard. So this thing all mixed up right now. Now it's a different breed. People started training everything, but you can't take the component of BJJ there. So it's proved statistically that grappling, MMA is the sport that grabbed the most. In between the branches of the sport, grappling or BJJ is the one that, you know, it really grows the most. And BJJ is better organized, not being an Olympic sport, is a little bit better organized in terms of business.
100%.
100%. And you see the difference in between boxing and BJJ. The BJJ is well done in places like this, or places that, you know, the middle class or the high level, you know, social economic speaking, you know, all those rich kids, they can go there and train, and they actually can be really good at it, you know. And you see this is a reflection on the UFCs. A lot of guys winning there, they're coming from not a tough upbringing. They're coming from, you know, high school, or they actually come from colleges, and they got wrestling backgrounds, and they go train in California, in San Jose, or in Florida, and in good places, because the structure of the business, they charge for a lot of the BJJ. The BJJ has one thing too. It's so hard to train wrestling or judo every day. It hurts.
Yeah, there's a huge attrition rate in those sports in terms of injuries, and I mean, the build-up. By the time you're in your mid-30s, if you've committed, you know, 15, 20 years to the sport, you might be done.
Statistically, wrestling is the sport that most hurt into the Olympics. The competition wrestling in the Olympics is the one that causes more injuries. That's what they say. And it hurts. The BJJ, you can go to a certain level, not at a black belt level, world championships, but you can go to a certain level training every day and night, and you can train hard because being on the ground, you don't have the same impact, and you can tap and you can flow on the ground. It's a minimum space, is a little bit, it's easier. Let's put it this way.
It's certainly much safer. And in terms of all the streams, as you mentioned, at the masters level, you'll have people competing in their 40s, in their 50s, so on and so forth. Not to say they don't compete in other styles, but BJJ accommodates that.
It just hurts less.
Right, it hurts less.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And I have done it. I train wrestling. I compete in wrestling.
In Brazil.
In Brazil, I was a state champion in wrestling in Brazil, which is nothing. But I did wrestling. I compete in wrestling. I compete in judo a lot. Competing in jiu-jitsu a lot, and definitely I can say jiu-jitsu hurt the less, you know.
You've seen the sport grow and change with the trends. What's your current opinion on all these various changes in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? For example, learning online. What do you think of that? Online learning for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Online learning, I think, is excellent. I think it's part of what the culture is right now. Yeah. Being rewarded online for not seeing training or not coming to a place to actually interact, that's a different story. That's a different story. I've been telling the guys here, learning online, we're in a century of learning is for all, and learning is free for all. You go online and you can learn absolutely anything. You can learn how to change and do things that, you know, 30 years ago you couldn't. So the YouTube, the social media, and everything else, this is wonderful. That's wonderful. It's just going to progress and evolve more and more things in the world. But you take what is truly, what's the most important, man, is connection, is create a bond and between instructor and a student, and help those guys to come in. And you can't do it. It's BJJ. You need a partner. You got to go train. You have to be. You can't do katas in the mirrors and you think you're going to be good just doing shadow boxing. It's not the way it works. You got to train for real if you want to compete at least, or even if you really want to use this as self-defense, you got to put your hand and work. That's how it works in BJJ. Learning online is excellent. There's so many tools that you can learn a lot. and be creative. This is wonderful, man. I love that. I use that. But you reward people online. That's just, it doesn't make sense to me. The guy had to come over here and pay his dues to come to a place and to come and train, and you can help and you see, and in daily basis, even if you just film that, that's tools that you can do it and to try to help with it. You can use all these tools to help enhance their capacity of learning. But you got to come and train.
For sure. I guess I'm asking the question because in a lot of different markets, we're seeing the role of the disruptive role technology plays in changing certain business models. Of course, you're familiar with Uber. Yes, and the role that plays in transportation. Do you think the disruptive nature of online learning for martial arts threatens the traditional dojo model? I think you've answered that question, but do you think, I mean, with the advent of various forms of technology, everything from virtual reality even, right? I know it's probably a little too early to speak of that, but I could see it already with VR sets of people training technique and just working, not necessarily rolling randori style, but just drilling sequences and
You got to understand this, even with that, BJJ or judo, you still need a partner to practice the technique. In a striking, you could go and look at the mirror or use the punching bag and you do a couple of things, which is not just only recreational, is a form of adaptation of the sport and to evolve precision and strength and power. For us, we need somebody, man. We need somebody that can move. Even if you have a dummy and you practice an armbar, this guy's not moving. You need somebody if you really want to have a real awareness of distance, levels, angles, and even on the ground, you need somebody who's going to be moving with you. So you have to practice with somebody. So it changed a little bit. That's the difference, which is also a characteristic of the sport that it's kind of hard to even when you teach classes. It's like a BJJ has so many angles to learn. And your foot is here in a hook, and you got to take the base on this side and look at my hip here. You got to come this way, and you turn it to the other side. What's in teaching position when you actually is in front of the class, you have to hear and turn, and so everybody see the details. And the striking is much easier. You can got 40, 50 people in a class and one instructor, and started seeing from far away, but they're all stand up. It's just different. What I try to say is that I think the tool should be used to evolve, and you're going to adapt to this. You always can. This is technology, guys. You can't stop technology. The guy who thought that he could continue with his VCR fixing and CDs and everything else, and keep the store open. It's gone by now. You got to evolve. It's not going to stop because of what we think. You use the tools, but people still have to gather. I think people do martial arts is to learn how to learn, and to connect with people and get involved and create bond and belong to somewhere in something. Especially in BJJ, you want to belong to something. You want to belong to a team. You want to belong to people that you trust, believe in, and you appreciate. So I don't think this bond is going to go away. I
know that you're involved with visually impaired judo, and of course that's part of the International Blind Sporting Association. That's a standardized international organization that facilitates training for blind athletes. What about visually impaired jiu-jitsu? Because I almost think, as much as I'm a fan of IPSA and the involvement for judo, we have a local athlete here. His name is Tony Walby. He competed for Team Canada at the Olympics in Brazil, and he was representing Canada. He's a blind competitor. What about VI jiu-jitsu?
I think this is way more cut. Jiu-jitsu is custom made for visually impaired. Custom made.
Tell us why.
Why? Because first of all, you disengage. Every time in judo that you disengage, you need somebody. It all depends on levels, right? You have levels of blindness. You characterize of levels of how you can see. If you're a certain level, you're completely blind. You have to go back and you get the competitors and make sure that they grab again and they go back from there. And Hajime, from there they go. In BJJ, is on the ground. is the touch, the feeling. How many times you actually do BJJ with the eyes closed, and that's basically, you go from there. You know exactly what's coming. You can see it. At so many times, it's so much easier because of the contact. And besides that, like I said to you, you minimize the space. You don't from here to go down there. Very rarely you see this in BJJ. Usually you have an area and people move from here to there, but not completely all around. Maybe in competition when they start standing up, but not in the ground, you know. So it's custom made for that. This is one of the biggest, and this is one of my projects for the future. You know?
Oh, it's one of your projects, yes? Like, so tell us about that, because I think there's a huge audience of practitioners that would value Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in terms of visually impaired athletes.
There's two main goals for me right now. You know, I'm actually retired of training high-level athletes. That's something that I really wanted to change right now. It takes a toll too much of kids, and in my family, and I'm traveling and everything else. I think we have a lot of people to fill this gap. But beyond anything else, you know, for me being a father of the visually impaired, and I know not just the physical aspect or the necessity as it is, but the necessity of the social integration between kids. I give it a good example. George Stern, we sponsored in Coconut Creek the Lighthouse, which is the agency for the visually impaired, and we had a summer camp with more than 50 kids. One of those kids, they actually, the VI teacher, the visually impaired teacher of my daughter, actually knew it, George Stern, who is a visually impaired kid with 18 years old who just finished high school. And maybe people don't know, visually impaired kids, when they finish high school, a lot of them has no financial background to go to college, and they just wander in the house doing nothing because there's no school anymore. You know, there's nothing else. This next state, if you're not qualified to go to college and you have the financials to go to college or help to go to college, you just wander in a house. So this kid was 2 years doing absolutely nothing in his house, and BJJ came to save his life. He was like contemplating things because he was just staying in the house, and that was it. And first time he learned how to take a bus by himself so that he could go train. And he spent the whole day training with us. And this kid was state champion fighting against sighted guys. You know, and it was beautiful to see the transformation in the life of this. And he's just one. You know, there's more. And how many kids that actually be inspired and can get this motivation by that. You know, if you're not have a chance to or be exposed to something like this, you're probably not doing anything. 60% of the visually impaired, 75% of the visually impaired adults are unemployed. Imagine that. You know, if you don't have a passion or something that you can do it, actually custom made for you, you have to find inspiration in some other things, you know?
Now, you're starting a project in regards to that. Is this, can we find it on your website? Is this...
Not yet, because in reality, I just created a nonprofit organization right now. And this nonprofit organization is going to be working with the school system in Florida. Okay. And the school system in Florida is approving this. We're having a project with the vision impaired there. And from there we go, so far on.
Very exciting project. We look forward to hearing more about that. Tell us a little bit about Stefan here. Tell us a little bit about him and his dojo in Canada.
I'm saying that Stefan is a friend, I don't know, from 5 years now. And
he says 10.
10 years. 10 years. Oh, yeah. 10 years. So he said the 5 times that I came over here. From 10 years now. But this is one thing about Stefan. You talk about love of a martial arts as somebody who really, really loves what he's doing. Stefan has many chances to change his profession and go in different ways. He is a guy who has a keen eye and ideas and research and an open mind to learn a lot of the business side and to produce and to actually go. He could go so many different ways, but he really stick with the passion and the love that he had from a kid, you know, since he has a kid. And you can't go wrong with his heart. You know, I used to say that there's so many good people in Canada, man. You know, the approach of the Canadians are so different, and the kindness. You can see the kindness in the way to speak and the way you treat people.
So you're moving here.
If it was, I keep saying this. If it wasn't that cold, if it wasn't the north or the snow, I would definitely contemplate on that. But I love this place because I believe in that. I think a solution for the violence is kindness, and the solution and the incentive for our sport, because it's so related to violence in a certain way. We can try to fog that, but it's not. You know, it's defense or self-defense has some influence on violence. Kindness and love, man, and passion is the key, you know, to incentivize, you know, in people to come over and see it, and see somebody who really carry all these characteristics, and at the same time is a weapon, is a machine, has so much knowledge that actually can kill with the hands. All of this balances out. You know, you have to. Very few people can integrate with families. You know, you have a tough guy, great athlete, but he cannot teach your kid, or you cannot put your kid to learn from him because of the values, because of the person itself. It's really about a person. So when I talk about Stefan, I see this. I see a person that I would definitely bring my daughter to learn from. I'll give in his hand and say, okay, man, raise it from there. You know, I wanted to be part of your life. I want you to teach her, you know, how to be a person with your characteristics, you know, with your personality. So, like I said, Stefan is an amazing individual, you know. That's one of the reasons that I love to come over here. I feel home. Besides, I feel home in all the things that Canada brings to the table is the passion for martial arts and the human being that he is. You know, that's and it's just open-minded. He is. Very few people that I know actually bring high-level teachers and martial artists to learn from. That's so humility, you know. He's so humble to do this, and he's so in love with his students to do and offer this to them. And this is wonderful. So that's why I see this is going to progress more and more and more, you know, because he attached people to the professional side. You know, they're great martial artists and great people also.
Last question for you. Obviously, Georges St-Pierre is going to be making a comeback in professional mixed martial arts, and he's going to be, since I have a bias, I won't even mention his opponent's name, but who do you pick, George or that other British guy? Or that British guy?
Well, I think the size is going to matter a lot. You know, I think George is way more technical. There's no doubt about it. It's as much as I think Bisping, you know, it's a character that I will not vouch for. It's not my characteristic. I think it's going to be a tough fight for Georges St-Pierre. Ring rust is going to play something, but beyond anything else, it's size. You know, and I would love to see Georges St-Pierre beat him.
So you're saying Georges St-Pierre will beat Michael Bisping?
I would love to say that. Yeah, I would love to.
You just said it.
I would just love to see that, but it's going to be a tough fight.
Well,
It's going to be a tough fight for George because of the size. And like it or not, Bisping is tough. It's nails, you know. But I'm Georges St-Pierre. Believe me, I wear the collar for them.
There you go.
Me, I do.
There you go. Well, sir, thank you very much for your time. On behalf of Lewis Hill, who's a big fan of yours and a big fan of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, he's operating the camera. We are Capital Combat Parley. My name is Garmamie Sido. That's Lewis Hill. Thank you very much for your time here. It was an honor.
Merci à vous.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur. How do you say it in Brazilian Portuguese?
Obrigado.
Obrigado. Obrigado. Capital Combat Parley.